Welcome, BBCers, to episode number 208 of the Broken by Concept podcast, the number one SoloQ educational and motivational podcast. Curtis, today we're going to be starting with the 10 things that you and I wish we knew sooner when it came to climbing ranked in League of Legends. Now, we have quite extensive experience and time that we've spent improving at this game, coaching, me starting the game, you and I basically season 2, you season 1. So, we're talking about, 12 years of experience here, or like experiences that we can sort of draw off on. So like when we were actually doing our notes and like writing these like down, like I've had like eras.
Yeah, me too.
Like, so I was a little bit like where do I start? Like, is that still relevant in the today's landscape?
It was interesting even reflecting back on it, because I had to really put myself through the times where I had to basically revisit a lot of my painful experiences.
Yes.
I kind of went to my painful experiences and I'm like, what did I wish I knew that would have helped me navigate this situation? Some of them I would say from earlier on in my ranked journey. Some of them are later on in my ranked journey. So I don't know. I haven't seen we've kind of gone off on our own and I guess compiled our notes. So what we'll do, the way we'll do this is one at a time. You can kick it off first and then we can kind of bounce off each one.
Yep. So we'll do 5 each.
Yeah, 5 each.
All right, now my first one here, and I think it's important for us to talk about sort of the timeline when we sort of had this learning.
Okay.
Because again, the 10 plus years that we've been playing the game. My first one here was, you'll be surprised, picking up a new champion or play style is not as hard as I thought it would be. I really pigeonholed myself into this mindset that I was this tank only player with my whole Udia tank playstyle, and I tried to transition to every tank, and I just thought like I put all these years, all this time and effort, like that's just me, and then when I started playing like more damage carry on oriented junglers like the Elise, the Jarvan and stuff, I was like, obviously I understand I've got a lot of mastery on the other champs, but like it's not as bad as I thought it was. Like I could just switch, and I had a lot of fun as well. I thought I wouldn't have fun, but there's so much that League has to offer, and every champ has the cool little niches, and there's so many levels of champions. Yeah, it wasn't going to take as long as I thought it initially did.
So what was your fear at the time? Your fear was that you were just going to waste your time playing this new style. It just wasn't for you.
It would just never click. Like it would just never.
You were never
click.
going to be as good at that style than you would with this other style.
And well, I knew that I could if I put in the time, but I thought it would just take too much time. It wasn't worth it. And my learning was it didn't take as much time as I thought it would have. It wasn't as difficult to get to that level of like, again, not amazing, but pretty good, pretty decent. Like I can win games and feel in control of games if I just play the champ reference points and identities.
So what was it that you didn't understand about that? Like, what was the mechanism that you didn't understand, such that you were able to pick it up faster than you thought?
I think it's just
the game
narrative. It was just the narrative that like
Right.
I've learned how to play tank junglers. That's it. Like I just play and I view the game a certain way, and I wouldn't be able to view it another way or win games another way. I guess it's sort of like a fixed mindset in a way.
Did you see this with other clients as well? Like, do you see this still to this day?
Yeah.
So what do you see it typically with? From what style to what style, or just from no particular direction?
Yeah, I would say it does seem to happen with the like more support oriented type junglers, or like people that play Ivan and stuff like that. They're really hard to get out of that lane. Like you wouldn't see like someone go from like Ivan or the more tank style junglers to suddenly they're playing Elise. Like that's really difficult for them. And again, maybe they don't enjoy that, but they don't even sometimes give it a try.
So I guess what you would wish you knew, and so to clearly illustrate the point, is that you wish that you gave these other champions a try. You wish you didn't pigeonhole yourself, and also you said it wasn't as hard to pick up as you thought, but also it was more fun. Like you actually enjoyed them more than you thought as well. Like you actually learned to have fun with them.
Yes, that's
interesting.
Right.
So the advice you would give to others is have a crack. If you're contemplating it, have a crack.
Yeah. And don't be afraid of the whole time thing. Like again, I imagine how ridiculous is it looking back. It's like, I remember distinctly, I thought I'm only a tank player, and I tried to pick out, I remember writing down a piece of paper, every tank jungler. It was like Sejuani, Udia, like all these tanks. I think I had Ivan as well. I was going to be an Ivan main and stuff. And it was just such a brutal journey, and I just never could make it work. And then I was like, okay, let's actually just play a bit more damage. I think it might just be more specifically playing tank junglers is very different from playing tank support.
Sounded like it was just your comfort zone, really.
Yeah, it was my comfort zone. Yeah, and it's really fun. Playing other champs in League is fun, and picking them up. I think that's awesome. And I really just didn't think that for some reason that I wasn't capable of doing that.
Yeah, and it just goes to show, like, I think you just get so comfortable playing a particular style. And you even say that with just particular champions. It may not even be a style. You get comfortable being an OTP. I think there's a lot of people that I've worked with that have actually thought that they were, so for example, OTP material. And they're just being an OTP, not because they really love the champion, but because they're scared of moving to other champions. It's that comfort zone. I've played Katarina for 5 years. I can't stop now. You know, that's all I know. Well,
that's all I know. And that's my identity. That's what
your identity.
My friends say it. The ladder, my stats, everything shows points that I'm that player, that person.
It's like you kind of dig yourself a bit of a hole there. Now, look, there are probably people that's the way they enjoy the game and they do want to go down that rabbit hole. But more often than not, from what you're I guess you're learning here and from what we've both seen is that most people would actually have a lot of fun expanding their horizons and trying something different and getting out of their comfort zone. And either way, even if it wasn't for you, there's still great learning there to be had either way.
Exactly right. Then you can sort of know what I don't like, you know? Oh, it's one of yours, guys.
Okay, so this one, I was thinking back to, I've spoken about this many times, but back in the day, Nathan, when I was we were playing together in Die Walls and kind of even before those days, I had some serious mental blocks when it came to reviewing my games. I couldn't do it. I was so, it's pretty ironic, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'm a coach now telling people to review, but I was the definition of I just couldn't look at my gameplay. I could not stand looking at my gameplay. And so...
Did you know that reviewing was helpful? Did you believe it deep down?
I think I really prevented myself from even going down that thought. I think I was delusional. I think I deluded myself into thinking that if I needed to review, then I wasn't talented enough anyway to make it.
That's the narrative.
That was the narrative.
Yeah.
And I think here this is what I wrote here was, I think what prevented me was deep stage 4 issues relating to fixed mindset, ego protection, and fear of failure, not wanting to know what my limit was. I kind of had this belief that if I had to review... then I guess I probably wasn't good enough. And I wish I manned up earlier and just really faced my mental block and just tackled it head on. I wish I just sat there and literally just kind of owned that it was going to be a struggle. And I owned that it was going to be difficult. And I owned the fact that there was a reason that I felt so uncomfortable. Like I thought that was just normal. Like you just feel uncomfortable reviewing, but that wasn't that amount of uncomfortability was not normal. And I wish I just tackled that sooner. And I wish I didn't ignore it. And I think I've seen a lot of clients say something similar. Like, I just can't review my games. And it's painful to watch because I'm like, I was there. I totally understand you. And I just think that if I were to go back in time, I just would have really tackled that mental block. I don't think I would have ignored it. And I think it really hindered how good I could have been at the game. And I think I could have been a lot better at the game.
You like to say all the time, if you had the mindset now and your approach to the game back when you were a pro player, Direwolves, I always think about, when you were a mid laner back in 2015, like that split when we were doing really well, we came second. Like, imagine you then.
Oh, it's just aggravating, really.
Yeah.
If I had an approach, I actually reviewed games just to think the level that I could have reached at that. It's just, I mean, look, it's easy to say in hindsight, but that's just definitely something I wish. It's definitely something I wish I knew sooner.
Yeah.
That's my big one.
Yeah, I mean, it is very painful to look at the reality of your gameplay, and even a way hard to accept.
Because it's okay. This is something I see all the time, and again, I personally resonate with it. Is that your gameplay always looks worse than you think it does. And so when you're playing, you think you're looking awesome. You think you're playing awesome. It looks cool. But you look at it in the review and I'm like...
This is why POV is really important, by the way, because that really shows your clicks, your camera movement. Open up a replay on the client you can look like a different player.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
And I think owning the fact that your gameplay isn't sexy And I think like really embracing that and using that as a sign to be like, okay, well, what is ugly about this? Like, what can I do better to clean and tidy this up? I think I always wanted to avoid that conversation. I wanted to not even get into. I couldn't accept that that's what my gameplay looked like. It's like, oh, if I just keep playing, I keep getting more games in, I'm just gonna get better, and it just never really happened. It never really materialized. And like you only. I think you only cap out to where your talent takes you. And I think I just wanted to see how far that talent took me. And when I did reach that point, it was such a fear of it was such a fear of knowing what that point was, I guess. And then whenever I hit that cap, it was just like denial. I was just met with denial. It's like, this can't be the case. And that's why I guess I didn't want to review. So, yeah, I would say that's kind of my first one in a nutshell.
Love that one. I think a lot of people can relate to that one. All right, my next one here. LP, your past rank does not matter. Now, this doesn't mean that like, hitting a rank, just to diminish, it's like, oh, yeah, achievement means nothing. It means nothing. When I say that, it means nothing in the current game, the current second that I'm in right now. And I need to enter this mindset where every decision, what's next? This is my level of gameplay. It doesn't matter. I could literally say, wow, I'm challenger. I should just have an awesome early game. I can just path top to bot and I don't have to look at a single lane. I just know everything's going to happen. No, you have to collect information. That's not how the game works, right? So really just thinking about being present. What's my decision making in this game? And your past rank means nothing.
And I think I really resonate with this, but I also think that you got to be kind of brutal. Even if you don't even logically believe that, you got to brainwash yourself in a way. Yeah. Because what happens is your brain is going to say, oh, no, but it will tap you on the shoulder and say, no, but remember you were challenger last season. But no, you actually have to completely block out that voice.
Yes.
Completely block out. You can't even entertain it because the moment you listen to that voice, that's when it's going to be really hard for you to just focus on accepting the level of play. And notice how many stage 4, I guess how much pain we would actually be able to save from like the average client if they were to embrace that one thing. Every single day I see someone in the Discord saying, oh, I was that rank and now I'm this. Even in the same split, right? I was D2 2 months ago and now I'm Emerald 1. And that literally that sentence, that thought process is such a toxic hole to fall into.
Think about, well, essentially what you're doing by putting that out in the world, you're trying to make sense of that from a big picture. But you have to get specific from game to game. Yeah. Like that's never going to work. You're never going to actually have a correct answer ever. No. You could say, oh, I switched champ and stuff like that. Those things might be little things that, maybe did contribute to it, but that's never going to be the actual answer that's going to give you improvement.
And even if I were to sit there and type out exactly why that happened, it wouldn't actually change a thing about your gameplay in the next game.
Exactly right.
The only thing that's going to save you, and this is why we always say the review is the medicine. The gameplay is that is the solution. Like we get so jacked up about rank or past rank this. Okay, let's look at your literally your trading, your decision making.
At minute 4, that team fight at minute 10.
Minute by minute, what's going on here?
That lane assignment.
That's the only thing that's going to save you.
That's right.
So like we can create some crazy narrative and like storyline to outline exactly what got you from there to there. A lot of the time, it's just not even worth exploring. Right? Unless you're worried that there's a stage 4 thing. And then if that's the case, then maybe it's worth trying to dig up. But more often than not, you'll fix that stage 4 issue by getting into the details a lot of the time in a coincidental way. So yeah, I think that's a really, really important one.
All right. Is it your one now?
Yeah, I'll go in now. This one's very personal. There was a time earlier on my journey when this was kind of when, you know how like when you first start getting into the high elo community, I mean, this may not be applied to everyone, but I mean, it will in a roundabout way. So just bear with me. I don't know. I found that I always put other people on a pedestal. So my learning here is, I wish I knew. I wish I stopped putting everyone else that was better than me on a pedestal. And so what happened, I automatically assumed that if someone was better than me in this current moment in time, then they were just like they would literally bet better than me in some bigger, like a better gamer than me or something. Like they're a better person than me or something. Like
they're better talented. They're more intelligent.
Yeah, they're more intelligent. Yeah, there's something like
they're built different.
They're just built. Yeah, like the whole talent built different. Like I had this idea that they just must be built different. The fact that they're better than me or they're higher ranked than me on the ladder now.
Do you know where that comes into play? I see a lot of the time. It's more about the younger people. I mean, you're talking about this, you were like 18, 19, 20, but because you haven't had enough experience of time and you don't know the power of time and how time is actually the enemy to a lot of people. You could get what people get so much worse. Why is there pros that go in and out of the scene? That's how and understanding that there is effort, that it's not just, it's sort of like the whole argument of talent versus hard work,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're spot on. It is about time. I disrespected time. It's like I thought they were just magically teleported to that rank, and then they've just downloaded that information or whatever, and they're just more gifted than me or whatever. And then the reason this was so toxic though is because when I verse these players or whatever, it's almost as if like they had an edge over me because I always thought they were just superior.
So every decision they made, they think they must be doing something smarter than me here. So I must be missing something. You're second guessing yourself.
Yeah, or they're just gonna be. I'm always at the disadvantage. I'm always kind of on the back foot, if you will. It's like I come into an engagement and my default response was always like, "Oh, they're probably gonna outplay me" or something like that.
It was, yeah.
And then and that's like. That really took me years and years and years to just unpack. And a lot of the time, for me, like the way that manifested was that I just kind of accepted my place. It's like, that person is just better than me. And there's nothing I can do. He's on that pedestal. I'm down here. And then until that guy retires, that's just the way the natural world is gone.
The natural world order.
It's the natural world order. And I think that it started even by the language that I would speak about these people and like the way I viewed them at like this high level. So I think the learning, and something I wish I knew earlier, is that just because someone is at a higher rank with you now doesn't mean that they're always going to be better than the game than you. And they are doing very specific things in the game better than you. And it's your job to identify what are they specifically doing better than you. Like, get specific. And the more you say in that general high level bullshit kind of mindset, it becomes toxic, and then you will actually prevent yourself from actually beating these players because you just won't allow yourself to. You won't even be curious enough to even identify things you could be doing better because you've just naturally accepted that's just the way things are going to be. And I think you see this even in, I'm not saying this is just for Halo players, like this is for any player. You could even a friend in a friendship group that's like Diamond and you're in Emerald. It's like they're just better. They're just superior. No, they're just probably doing a few little things differently to you. Get specific. What are they doing differently to you? What gives them success in SoloQ over you? And then just get into the details.
It's the self-talk. If you keep saying that to yourself, these general things, you're not getting specific. Yeah, they're better than me. They're more intelligent. They're outplaying. They're just going to outplay me every single game. These means nothing.
And they will outplay you every game.
On paper, they will.
Because you're reinforcing that narrative.
Yeah,
though.
it's like a cycle.
It is a cycle.
It gets worse and worse and worse. Yeah, I mean, you said that people won't be able to relate to that one, but it's like people like clump up like, Emerald players or Diamond players.
Yeah.
These people pop in and out of these ranks and get worse and better at the game.
There's that. I got that friend who didn't get any coaching, doesn't review, and just got to master tier, slapping their dick on the keyboard. Well, and then you just keep speaking highly of this guy. This guy's so good. He's so talented. Blah blah blah. You will always struggle to beat that guy, and you will really struggle to overtake him because you're pigeonholing yourself as he's just up here and you're down here.
Yeah, you actually anchor your rank. So
anchor your rank.
What would be good for you? Let's say if you have a master friend that you think is super talented, because master is super talented with your friend, you might be like, oh, Emerald 1 or Diamond 4 is like that's the highest I could go because I can never match my friend who I think is just built different in this game. So you're actually going to anchor your rank.
Yeah, that's right. And you will subconsciously self-sabotage.
That happened the opposite with us, you and I, remember? That's also, I guess, it can be motivating where you saw me get to, the top of Challenger, rank 2, and then...
But that's because I think I knew you.
Yeah.
Like, personally. Like, I think that was for at least for me. I think why you didn't have that response to me, Because like I knew you.
Yeah.
Like the other people I didn't know them.
I see.
You know what I mean?
I see. So, but then there's redundant, that whole friend thing. So you're saying like you have to like
Maybe.
really know the person.
But we were like really close,
That's
right? Like
true,
we
that's
played
true.
games together even before you got high ranked.
Yeah, no, what am I talking about? It actually worked the opposite way. Sorry, there was the first one was because I was playing WoW and Guild Wars.
Yeah.
You on NA got to high diamond.
Yeah.
Which was, there was no master tier, it was just diamond.
Then Chow.
And then Chow.
Yeah.
Or was it just MMR?
There was no master.
Or was it just MMR at that point? No, I think there was just
there
MMR.
was Challenger because I remember the way it worked. I literally got into Challenger when the season ended.
Oh, I see.
And then, so it went from, there was no master, it just went straight into Challenger. It just ticked over.
This was right before with O servers, right?
Yeah.
So then I saw you being like a high diamond player
Yeah.
or whatever like that. And I'm like, I think I'm a way better gamer than
Yeah,
Curtis, 'cause,
interesting.
I thought that WoW and Guild Wars had more overlap with League than Counter-Strike did from that background. So I
Yeah.
think that must be super easy. So that was like, if Curtis can do it, I actually anchored myself higher.
But you know what's fascinating is that this is all just internal beliefs that are all like, they may not have any bearing on like the actual like reality. It's just like, it's all just in your head.
That's right, yeah.
It's like, you know what I mean? Like,
I would have, if you looked at my
It's
League gameplay
crazy.
there, I would have no right to say that.
No.
But it's just
It's
pure
like
belief.
some pure belief.
Yeah.
And that fuels, you makes you play with more confidence or whatever. It's weird.
It is weird, isn't it?
It is really,
The human
really
one's
weird.
So yeah, because you were a high diamond player, I was like, I should be the top of Challenger then.
Yeah.
And that's what
And
happened.
then it kind of manifested it.
Yeah, then it kind of manifested, and then it happened again. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm top of Challenger, and then you started playing, and you got like
Yeah.
rank 1 in SoloQ.
But I will say, like, it's had the opposite effect for me with other people, right? For example, Brandon.
because
and
you
stuff.
didn't know them as well.
Yeah, I didn't
That's-
really know them as well.
Yeah, that's
So I
the
don't
difference.
know. It's interesting.
Very interesting. All right. Next one. Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Oh, this is my favorite one. This is a more recent one of my journey. The last couple of years. Early game champion scale. So I had a very rigid view of the game. Is if an early game jungler or just champion doesn't get a lead, then it's auto loss. And the way that I viewed what a lead looked like has changed a lot, right? So understanding the experience of gold game, early game champions can scale if you have the mindset of like, I'm just going to always maintain experience in gold. If you get 3 items, you could probably kill anyone.
I
versus on
wish
2
I knew
items.
that as well. That's actually, I didn't note that, but that's actually something I wish I knew. I always had that weird like belief that, LeBlanc doesn't scale and all these champs don't scale, but no, they do.
When you verse a really good player with that champion, it breaks your mind because you're like, why are they never weak? Because they're always maintaining high experience in gold, and they have that mindset of like they're happy to just scale.
But you know what's fascinating though is that even though that evidence was presented to both of us in many sequences, you actually chose to ignore it. We both did. You would see like a Lee Sin or something back in the day, like that would do really, really well. And even if they won that game, you would choose to selectively ignore that game, thinking that maybe they just got lucky or something. When in reality, no, they were just like playing really, really, really well. And so like you chose to ignore that for such a long time. And I chose to ignore that for such a long time. I would see a LeBlanc, like for example, Claire's LeBlanc, who would play insanely well and carry this game and pop off and never get outscaled. But I would just selectively ignore that and just be like, oh yeah, he just kind of got lucky or whatever the narrative was. Yeah. And it took us so long until we actually maybe even played the champions, I think, to actually, I think, break through that belief.
Yeah, we had to sort of feel it, I guess. I sort of had to prove it. I was like, okay, fine then. I'm just going to try it. How about I just play full clear XI, right? And only take high percentage plays. And then I'm like, whoa, it actually worked. And then again and again, and it gets like, wow, I am actually completely playing a different game. And it's not, again, it's the mindset. It helps you not make those really bad
force plays. It helps you remain
poised. And poised. And you actually just play smarter league, which will actually help you, technically scale, but you're actually just getting more gold and experience and just closing out the game quicker.
That's one of the most... I would say it's one of the hardest things to wrap your head around in the game is the idea of every champ scales in a weird way. And it's so non-intuitive. Like this idea that like, for example, you have like, and the way power spikes and troughs work and how they work into certain champions. Like, you would think a champion like Ari, for example, they're not like typically a hyper scaling or some sort of, amazing scaling champion. But you rock up to an 18 or a 19 or 20 minute fight where they have 10 CS per minute and an item and a half, they are the scariest champion in the game. and they can feel like, and then you compare that. It's like, okay, well, there's a 10 CS per minute Cassidy. You won't even, you know what I mean? Like, you won't even sometimes feel the difference. It's like they're both just doing boatloads of damage. Kits just do something different. And yes, objectively, if the game goes to like 35, 40 minutes and they just stat check and they just run into each other, sure, that's where the numbers will really come into play. But more often than not, most champs, if farmed well, feel completely fine and will scale completely fine. That's just like it's just so hard to wrap your head around.
It's really difficult.
It doesn't even make sense.
Because you know why? You're actually getting constantly confirmed that because you're versing players that have that mindset because it's the whole community, right? So you'll see, you know, like Warwicks and all that sort of stuff, force players to just drop off the cliff because no one's playing that way. Because
it's so rare because everyone has that narrative. Yeah. Exactly right.
You're never going to see, like in my clients, my reviews all the time, people will say, I feel like I have to do things early this game. So think about the person that's playing against that jungler. Let's say I'm reviewing a Warwick player and they're literally telling me that's their mindset and they're forcing and just ruining the game. Then that jungler's just like, oh yeah, Warwick's super shit. Like he just drops off like a cliff.
I had a game, I'll tell you this recently, I had a game where I versed a Kale, right, mid, and I'm playing Talia. And just like for whatever reason, and I had Warwick as well on my team. And for whatever reason, I made a few mistakes in the early game and like we didn't push the pace of the game. And so the game went to late game. And the Kale was like 10 CS per minute, full build, like had QSS, so Ward couldn't even, like no one could kill him or whatever. And then we just like played the map and I just ultied people as Talia and created man advantages and we won. And it just like leaves you thinking like, well, on paper, Kale's like, a raid boss and the strongest champ of the game and can kill anyone, but I have tools. I can do things as well. Right? I don't have to sit there and auto attack you. I've got range. I've got this R ability. I can do things. So it's like, you got to get your head out of this whole thing. Like, we just stand here and fight each other.
Yeah, we just look at each other and
you can get creative. And I think back in the day, especially like that, and especially when you're newer to the game, that level of creativity and like juicing the value of a kid is kind of foreign. It's not really something you can even wrap your head around.
All the invisible things, fog of war, playing fog of war.
Yeah, exactly. Tempo and creating picks and denying vision and man advantages and stuff like that. It's a good one.
All right. Is it your turn now?
Yep. I got one here. I wish I stopped playing for LP earlier on in my journey and started to focus more on the learning. I remember like vividly seasons kind of like 5, 6, like 4, 5, 6 especially. I was so focused on LP, like getting high rank, like especially I reckon specifically season 5. That's a big one. Season 5, like hitting challenger, right? Like just getting high challenger and being top 10 and all that stuff, right? I left so much learning on the table because I was just so obsessed with LP. All I cared about was being high rank. And even though theoretically I did continue to finish challenger each and every season, I just think back, holy shit, I could have been such a better player if my mindset was just purely focused on the learning. And you know who did that? Was Schönfire.
Yeah.
Schönfire was like, in my eyes, an anomaly. He was like the only player, the first player that I ever knew
that didn't play for LP.
And yeah, he wasn't high rank at the start, but then became the best player by far. And
just for context, we're talking about an Oceanic and OS player. He did get rank 1 on OS in 2016.
But he was like gold. But by the way, he was gold and plat when we were in Challenger.
When we were pro players,
literally gold, right?
And then this guy went over to Korea and was literally top 5 or top 3 on the server. This is when the prime of like SKT Faker, that sort of stuff. He got trialed
for T1.
For T1, SKT T1 with Faker.
And then I think he went to NA, got rank 1 as well. NA got like rank
1, 2, and 3 and stuff.
Yeah, rank 1, 2, and 3, and went to O's, get rank perma rank 1, right? So this is a player that literally top 5 in Korea, rank 1 in NA, rank 1 in O's, one of the best, dominate so far ahead of everyone. And he did that by focusing on the learning. That's what he did. He actually didn't care about winning games. He would actively just do shit that like, he could have just won the game easily, but he would do shit to limit test and like really like learn. And I didn't have that. I was the opposite. And he was the definition. That's why I always love Shern's story, because he was the definition of no talent, right? And this is why I say, like, people think that they're capped by their lack of talent. Schönfire was the least talented player I had ever, like one of the least talented players I'd ever seen.
Yeah. Well, just to talk about what Shern did when he went to Korea, like this guy slept on just a room, slept on the mattress in a very small room for like 6 months with zero social contacts. That he couldn't speak the language, right? Like you could argue that is talent. Like he's a psychopath.
No, but he's not like a naturally talented gamer.
No,
like his mindset
not.
maybe, yeah, sure. But like,
yeah.
But you would think of like those talented gamers that they play the game and after like a year they're already in master tier and shit like that. He was like a low elo player.
I think he started in bronze. Yeah, he was a genuine bronze.
Genuine, and his click. I watched him. Like his clicking was like disgraceful. And anyway, my point being is like, I just think that I wish I really had that mindset earlier on my journey. And I think it would, again, it's like shoulda, coulda, woulda, but you know, the focus on the learning. And there's a lot of people I see still to this day that are so focused on LP and they just don't get it. They still don't get the curious focus on the learning mindset. And I'm just want to shake them and wake them up because they're just leaving every game. They're leaving so much on the table. And the moment that clicks, the moment you really wake up and you're like, holy shit, it really is just about the learning. And then my LP was just going to come. Your life is just a trillion
and the game
better.
becomes so much more fun.
More fun,
So
more
much
satisfying.
more fun.
Everything solves. Everything just fixes itself.
The LP, it's like, you know, people use the term like the rat race or whatever. It's just like you're going to hamster wheel.
Yeah, you are.
Just like not going anywhere, but like constantly chasing. You know, it's like LP, LP, LP.
Yep, exactly right. So, big one for me.
All right, my next one here was understanding that there is good deaths. So specifically, I was very well known for not dying.
Yep.
Back in my Udia season 3. So this is probably way earlier on because the interesting thing is that the last couple of years, I went too much to the extreme. Like I'll die in team fights all the time because I thought my team would always clean up and I'll have a lot of threat. So yeah, understand that there is good deaths in League. I think people... Now, it can be a tricky one, this sort of advice, right? Because deaths in general are bad, but once you start switching your mindset to the games and experience and gold and like people have resources, like you can die and like burn 2 flashes, but I'm a Nocturne, so I can get that. And there's no objective up, so I can get kills on the back end of that. This idea that the game's chess turns.
The concept of high value versus low value deaths,
High value
right?
versus low value deaths, exactly right. And understand that that's a concept. Before, when I played Udia and stuff, I would just not go to, like if I didn't think that if I had any idea that I could maybe die, I just wouldn't go to the fight. And that actually really hurt my limit testing and my mechanics a lot because it would just be too rigid for me and I would leave a lot on the table. But I was very successful for me in the early days. But then I think people got better and then I couldn't do it that way anymore. Because yeah, I mean, I like genuinely, if you were looking at my KDAs for my Udia back in, you know, when I had like a 60-70% win rate in season 3 when I got to, you know, 1K LP, you know, season rank 2 challenger, my score lines would literally be like 4-1-15 because I was playing Udia tank. Like I would just not die. I would have had one of the lowest deaths in like anyone on that server at the time. So it did work for me, but then that hurt me later down the stages. My view of the game was too rigid where you just never die.
Yeah, and I think that it's a pretty revolutionary idea. I mean, even though it sounds quite obvious now in hindsight, but back in the day, if we had known that earlier, it would have made things make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Like simple as like a dive. Nowadays dives, the last couple of years, you know, jungling and dives are really important. Understanding that if you dive and you actually die, but you kill them and you deny 3 waves, that nets out to way more value than your death.
And even like, I think this is even relevant to this day specifically. You know, I went through the set journey. We did the set guide in the Top Lane Academy. I had a question. Someone said, is it normal that I have all these high deaths as set? And I'm like, well, yeah. And what my answer to the question was, well, it depends on the quality of those deaths. When you're playing set, you are going to have naturally high deaths because that's just the nature of the champion, especially with how chaotic it is in mid game, especially in the lower elo brackets. But what I said is like, okay, it's very different if you die, but in a team fight, you get a 3-man R, get your W off, chunk him, and then die versus you just get picked in the side lane when your entire team is in base. So what I said is like, it's okay to die. You are going to die, and it's okay to have 5-6 deaths in a game, but it's not okay if those are very low value deaths. So I think even for the average player now, even that mindset, especially if you're playing bruisers, you are going to die. It's inevitable. You're not going to go 9-0 as Darius or 9-0 as one of these, you know, these champions. But it's the value of those deaths. And I think that's a really, really great learning. I love that.
All right, is it your one now?
I wish I spent more time expanding my view of the game. I wish I played champs opposing my identity sooner. Very similar to you. I literally wrote, stop pigeonholing myself. For example, with LeBlanc and Kiana and Zed. So I don't really want to repeat this too much, but that's the same thing with me. I wish I got out of my comfort zone earlier. I had a fixed mindset in terms of my identity. I viewed myself as this control mage player. that couldn't play assassins, and it took me way too long to get out of that. And like you, I thought I wouldn't enjoy them, but I did. I ended up loving them. I mean, Fizz became one of my favorite champions ever, which was complete, contrast to what I enjoyed about the game. And I thought I wouldn't be good at them, and I became amazing at champs like Galio and Fizz.
Yeah, your Fizz was insane, and that's a complete
180. So I just think that I wish I took the plunge earlier. Look, I don't want to say you should be jumping all over the place with your identity. I think it's important to have a player identity and like kind of own what you're good at. But I think if you're ever getting to the point where it's like, okay, I'm really struggling into these champions, I don't understand them well, it can be good to go and just learn one. It's like, okay, say I've played Orianna and TF for the last 3 years, and I'm really just struggling into Zeds and Akalis and stuff. Go through a stint where you just play Akali. Just learn Akali. And even you don't have to play all the assassins, just one assassin. That can completely change your entire view of the game. And I wish, because I used to struggle massively back in the day into Zed and those sorts of champions. And I wish I just took the plunge and learnt those champs way
And
early.
again, it wouldn't have taken as long as time as you think, as people think, to just understand the weaknesses of the champions so you can play against it more effectively.
And it made me a better mage player.
Great one. Love that one. My next one, this is my last one here. This is my fifth one. Mid-game, this is interesting. Mid-game is where games are really won or lost. And this is so funny because people are like, well, Nathan's the end of review guide, the early game jungler. This is a really sort of recent learning. This has actually helped me push from Grandmaster to a Challenger player last season. Was the last couple of seasons, was understanding that you can still mess up like a lot in the early game, but like the deaths and stuff, they're not, again, there is end of review deaths, but the mid game, people just really suck at mid game, like really, really bad. Even in the higher ranks, people are really bad with lane assignments. Junglers, this is maybe more of a specific jungler thing, but junglers can have massive impact in the mid game. Just hovering the right side lane, beating at the objective correctly, basing, resetting. And I just had a lot of success just knowing, okay, I might not have the best early game, but I know my mid game is just going to be beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. I think this was a big one for you to overcome. And, if you had known that sooner, it probably would have saved you a lot of painful experiences. And you would have got way higher elo way quicker, by the way.
Yeah.
Because your early games were good, but you just threw games all the time in mid game.
Because my early games were
because you gave up mentally.
Because my early games I thought had to be perfect.
Yeah, and you'd make one mistake and you'd mentally check out.
Yeah.
When in reality, you could have still easily won many of these games, but you would mentally check out.
Yep.
I think that's a really big one. I don't know how relevant that is to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's
a bit personal.
It might be the worst advice, but this helped me a lot.
Yeah,
maybe one person out there.
It is something you definitely wish you knew earlier.
Yeah.
I think you would have also been a much scarier player to verse in general in SoloQ. Because I always knew if Nathan makes one mistake, I'm just going to win.
So easy.
I'm just going to win. He's going to mentally check out.
It was true.
Not because you couldn't play mid game, you just chose not to.
Yeah, I chose not to. Yeah,
which was so interesting. I'm like,
well, again, my narrative was like, I don't deserve to win this game, so I'm not going to try. Right?
Yeah, I guess it made sense, but didn't at the same time.
It is. That was just Nathan mind things.
Well, I mean, character building, Nathan. Definitely some character building there. And the last one for me was, I wish I actually took the time to understand why things were the way they were earlier in my league journey, following the mantra that everything makes sense. So I think for me, I over-indexed on being a very intuitive player that never really understood why games felt the way they did. So, okay, this one was... Okay, I vividly remember this. There was a mid laner that was promoted. He's actually an LEC coach now, Swiffer, right? Swiffer, very well-renowned old school OS player. He was probably arguably the best mid laner in OS for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And very smart player as well.
We've done a podcast episode with him.
Yeah, we did a podcast episode with him. Who's he coach now?
SK. He's been SK for a long time.
I think he's doing pretty well.
Yeah, they're doing quite well.
And every time I laned versus him, I would always get this feeling of like, I'm just on the back foot. Like, I just felt like I'm uncomfortable. This doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like I'm versing these other players. And I never even bothered to really get into the details of why. I was just accept it. I was never curious. Like, what is he doing specifically better than me? And I think this again tied into this broader thing. It was like, I learned over time, and it took me way too long to realize this, that if I felt uncomfortable in a game, there's a reason for that. You don't just randomly feel uncomfortable for no goddamn reason. If you feel anxious, you feel strangled, you feel you have no options, you feel like you're in a bad situation, there is a reason for that. And it's your job to understand why. And so you need to use your intuition, your games, and your emotions as a sign to investigate. But for the longest time, I never did that. I would just accept that's just the case. It's like, oh, I'm in an uncomfortable situation. Yippee. I'm just going to, get my way out of it somehow. And I just wish that if I knew sooner that I could use my emotions or my intuition as an indicator of just being curious at those moments. I think it really would have leveled up my play. And again, I think maybe this is kind of combined in some way to the whole putting other people on a pedestal. I thought that was just inbuilt in the system. They just do that better than me, and that's just the way it is. I mean, that's the fixed mindset, blah, 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 blah. But just that simple realization. And I think, and I'll be honest, it's actually helped me in my real life as well. Like if I feel shit about something, I'll address it.
You investigate it.
I'll investigate it and tackle it rather than just like, mulling over it and accepting it,
Yeah.
and I think that's actually been a massive help in my life holistically. So I use that as not only an in-game and process related thing, but even like a personal thing. So definitely wish that was something I wish I knew earlier in my league journey.
Great. There you go. That is our 10 things that we wish we knew sooner about climbing in league.
Now we have another interesting little topic.
We do. We've been asked about this a bit.
I've already been asked like 5 times in my Discord community. So let's get into it. Do you want to kick this one off?
So Xpetu, we've done an episode with him. Really, people love that episode. That was a great one about his journey as a one trick, his improvement, his philosophy on the game. He has launched a coaching app called Coachless. So we've been asked a lot about this is a really exciting thing. What are our thoughts? So we'll have the link of the video in the description if you want to look at his video announcing it. So we'll quickly just briefly touch on what he talks a bit about and like what actually is this. So it's called Coachless, and he said this is inspired by the way that he got good at the game, just similar to us, is about reviewing. He reviewed games and he's done some coaching and he literally called out his viewer base saying no, he knows that no one reviews their games. And people really struggle to do it because people don't know what to look for. And it's a really brutal and daunting process, especially for newer players. So what he wanted to do was create an application that basically streamlines the review process by identifying key moments in the game that will automatically tell you need to go and review this specific point. So you're not overwhelmed.
Statistics.
Using statistics.
So it says statistically at this point in the game, your likelihood of winning the game dropped from 52 to 45 or something. So you could kind of easily identify like moments in the game that were deemed drastic or problematic.
It's all about win probability.
Yeah,
so literally we'll say, like he did an example on the video, like there's like death minus 6 LP, and you're not actually losing minus 6 LP, but that's like how detriment that play was. So my initial thoughts, it's really interesting concept, and it gets you sort of thinking, how could this be used? And obviously AI is obviously really become more popular, and he talked about machine learning. I think that helps use this. What's the potential of this, and what are maybe some challenges that an app like this could face?
Okay, well, I will say what I like about it is that it helps people identify things to review. I think that's great. Identifying key pivotal moments in a game that are worth investigating. You might die, a key death, or a team fight, or whatever certain thing happens. You can really, I guess it can streamline that process of picking maybe 2 or 3 moments in a game that you want to kind of investigate. I think it's cool for doing that for sure. I think I like the concept. I like where he's heading at. I do think it's just a tool. I think it has some drawbacks though. I think for me, I'm just going to speak from my coaching experiences, right? Just from what I've seen. Typically, what I work on with a lot of clients and what a lot of clients say to me is that it's less so that they struggle to identify, the key pivotal moments. It's like, well, they can review their deaths, they can look at their deaths, but either A, they keep reviewing. If they keep reviewing their deaths, that's not getting them LP. Like they're just stuck. This, like, I get it. I die here. I could have done that better, but that's not really that's not what's holding them back. Or they can go to these moments, but they don't really know how to review those moments. It's like, okay, I died here, but like, I don't really understand what I could have done differently. And what I see more often than not is that with a lot of my clients, it's a lot of small things that they're missing. For example, today I'll just speak from my most recent coaching. I did an Emerald 2 coaching session. It was an Ari versus Corky. And all of the moments that we covered, there was really bad resets. So he overstayed on too much gold. He wasn't hovering his jungler properly. So he was warding the wrong side and not leaning towards his jungler. So he was late to certain plays, or he wasn't even at a play that he could have potentially. He had miss roam opportunities as well because he wasn't playing in accordance to his jungler. He had rust charms and things like that. And his lane assignments in mid game were a disaster. Things like that. Now, in a lot of these instances, nothing really dramatic happened. There was no death. There was a lot of missed opportunities, but there was like a lot of small things. You're just behind in tempo. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. You're just late to plays. You just feel unimpactful. And so I think that my concern with this sort of thing is that, is it really going to, I don't see how it's going to be able to help identify all of those small invisible things that are actually leading to.
That would be pivotal moments, but the stats might not show that.
Like, yeah, the stats may not show that.
That's always been a problem with like people
not just this. I mean, there's not even not this one. Like other platforms,
yeah,
like
just
whether it's Mobalytics or
yeah.
whatever. That's the biggest problem. And I'm not saying they have no value. They definitely have value, and they're definitely good. I love it, and I think what Xpetu's built is great. I just don't think it's and it's definitely a great tool, but I don't think it can really. It's not going to take your gameplay to the next level. It will help you identify things for sure. It's going to add value to your gameplay and probably help you climb a little bit, but it's not really going to help you kind of push your gameplay to the next level, probably break through plateaus.
Yeah, unless somehow it can identify
missed opportunities.
Or missed opportunities. Because that's my question.
Yeah.
Is, okay, one of the most common ones that I see that is just massively game changing in my jungle reviews, especially for, Emerald and below, is the enemy jungle. It's 5 minutes in the game. The enemy jungler comes out of base, they do one camp, and then they go gank somewhere, and then you as a jungler are really good on tempo, and you have the opportunity to take 2 of his topside camps or whatever, and they just don't do it. They just autopilot to their next camp like Krugs or whatever. And denying those 2 camps is game-changing. That completely strangleholds the enemy jungler. If they end up going to the top side, checking those camps, there's nothing there. They usually lose their minds and go force another gank. You're basically going to be denying almost 2 kills worth of experience and gold by taking those 2 camps. So important, especially now in the jungle meta. How would it identify that?
I'm not sure.
That would have to be quite
advanced.
Yeah,
right? Or like scenarios where they go for a roam play, they get a roam off, but the roams actually had one where they got a kill, but their bot lane was already 0-3. So they got the kill. The kill is actually useless because the kill is not going to change how bot lane is going to play out. They can't even there's no bounty. So even if they get the kill, they're not going to do anything with it. That kill in isolation, all it's doing is now you're behind in tempo. You lost 2 waves. And now you don't have ultimate to help with the grubs coming up in 40 seconds. It's like stuff like that. I don't know how that would be. How's that going to be kind of calculated?
Well, just in general, again, not even his app, just in stat. That's not in the stats.
Yeah. And that's the tricky thing we found a lot of the time with stats in general. Like I think they're again a great compass. They definitely point you in a good direction. But we've found it very difficult to utilize them
to get to the next level.
Get
really specific and really big things are changing people's views of the game.
Yeah. So I think overall, I guess to summarize my take on it, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it's cool. It's got some potential there. I think in its current state, it's going to need a lot more work. I think for it to really be a game changer. But I think it's cool. I like the messaging behind it, getting people excited about reviewing, which I do agree. People are quite sloppy with reviews. And I think encouraging people, or at least making it less daunting, is really, really awesome. So I do like that.
Yeah, awesome idea. And yeah, I think the power of AI, maybe it can be really, really powerful too. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
It's funny, when we're sort of talking about this, we're just like sort of boomers saying like stats. So it's like that money ball,
Yeah.
like we sound like
maybe we are. Maybe
we are. And then the stats do completely, because that changed the game of baseball, right?
We don't know. And look, I guess we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the future holds. Maybe in a year's time, 2 years time, AI just takes over coaching and education improvement content in League of Legends, and maybe everyone just has an AI coach that just plays with them all the time. Maybe that's the future. I don't know, but all I'm going to say is from my experience, what I know now and what I'm seeing currently, that doesn't really add up. It doesn't really match, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's cool though. Interesting to see how it all progresses.
Excited to see how it goes. So good luck to Xpetu there.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, moving on to our Skool post of the week. This is our Skool community. Free to join. Link in description below. We will teach you League. This one here comes from Ryan. What is my champ's identity? Every week, I sit here listening to Curtis and Nathan talk about champ identity and reference points. I nod along thinking, yep, okay, I need to work on my champ master. I need to know my champ identity. But lately, it's just sticking in my brain. I don't think I actually know what my champ identity is or what my reference points are. Granted, I am in bronze and only been playing since season 12, but is there like some particular method or way of figuring this out? I feel like I know what my champ's identity is, but I'm certain that if I did know that, then I would not be stuck in bronze. I found I don't know when I am strong or not, both overestimating my strength and getting killed and underestimating it in times that I could have been tearing people up. Do you feel that you know your champ's identity, their reference points? How did you learn this?
It's a good question.
It is.
It's a very good question. Before we look at the responses here, and I actually had this really fascinating question from an MLA member this week, and he said, he's an Annie OTP, right? And he said, he's an Emerald player. And he says, when I play Annie, it feels like I can't understand or resonate why when people say, oh, this champion's strong on 2 items or 3 items, or I feel with this build you will spike more on 2 items, or this build spikes more on 1 item, and this build spikes on 3 items. He's like, it all feels the same to me. And what I said, and what my response was is this: I said, if you don't have a lot of experience playing other champions, it's very difficult to understand this stuff because it's all relative. Because think about it, right? Every champion in the game feels strong at 3 items. Right? There is not a single champion that gets to 3 items and like, gosh darn it, I feel weak. It's all relative, right? It's like, okay, well, how does 3 items this champion stack up to that 3 items, right? So, or Camille 2 items versus Darius 2 items. How do they actually interact and stack up, right?
Or just simply, I have 3 items, but I just miss all my abilities.
Right. So my point being, and what I said to him, I said, it's going to be very difficult for you to even understand this until you get more experience with the game and you champ will cycle. The more champs you play and you feel like, oh, yeah, when I play Swain and I have a Rylai's, I feel like I'm way stronger than when I played Annie and I'm on that item. Like, I feel like I can do way more. I can win these fights. I wouldn't have been able to, and then you can kind of draw back on your feelings and experiences. Or like, I'm playing Camille and it's like, yeah, I feel like I can't do much on 1 item, but like 2 items, holy moly, I feel like I can take over a game. Like, the more experience you get with the game and the more you champ will cycle or whatever, that becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. So your understanding of like champion strengths and weaknesses and power spikes and all that stuff will come kind of naturally, I believe, over time.
So you're saying that once you start understanding other champs' strengths and weaknesses, that helps you understand your, when you can go in and your strengths and weaknesses.
And then what I will also say, just to expand on this a little bit more, is that there are archetypes that you can blindly follow. Okay. So archetypes might be, for example,
to assassin. Yeah.
Okay. So, you have major categories, major archetypes, and you have like a subcategories, I guess, if you will, right? So let's say top lane and you have bruisers, right? You would have bruisers such as like say or top lane kind of fighters such as Darius and Set and things like that, right? But then you'd also have fighters such as Fiora, Jax, and Camille. Now they're all fighters, but they're different subcategories. You got the Sets and the Dariuses is that probably more spike on like an item, maybe 1 or 2 items. And then you got the Jaxes and the Fioras and the Camilles that's more like 2-3 items, right? And they can actually scale hardcore into the mid to late game. My point being is that once you understand the at a high level, the rough archetypes, you can kind of plug and play. So an example would be 80 carries. Most 80 carries spike on 3 items, right? That's as a general rule of thumb. Most 80 carries spike on 3 items. There are some outliers. Some will spike on 2 items. Some can even be all right on 1 item. But as a general rule of thumb, If you're unsure about when a champion is strong or weak, 80 carry, 3 items. Okay, mid laners, right? You have mid laners. Most mid laners spike pretty hard on 2 items as a general rule of thumb. It's not that they're weak at 3, but 2 they become quite strong. Assassins it can typically spike even on 1 item, but then they will typically spike hard on 3 items. Like usually it's 1 and then 3 items. So you can over time notice what these kind of general archetypes are, and you can kind of use that as a general reference point to understand when things are strong or weak. Now, I don't know, that's not the question, but I thought that was an interesting tangent here to kind of get you thinking in that way.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. Did you want to go into the comments?
Yeah, so let's see so Leon here says, I could explain champ identity with my main Dr. Mundo, currently Diamond 2 on EU West. The community at large perceives him as a tank and that he is supposed to group and team fight. While it is true that Mundo is durable, he does not contribute much to a team fight like Malphite, and he can have a hard time chasing down priority targets. I find that he is much better suited for split pushing. His durability, mobility, and passive makes him able to take a much riskier and aggressive stance on the map. The wave clear and E and AD boost also had a much bigger impact on a side lane than in a TF. Furthermore, can we consider the passive which allows him to ignore 1 CC in a TF? Is that in a Twist of Fate? This is effectively tenacity, as you are likely to get hit by multiple CCs. In a situation where you're trying to run away from the enemy, a single CC block becomes far more impactful. So you see now that if I know my champion's identity and role in a team, it is far easier to play to his strengths, and even if my team disagrees with what the champion's identity is.
So one thing I want to note here, I want to riff on this a little bit. It's important to note that if you're a beginner, you're new to the game, it's borderline impossible for you to really have a great understanding of your champ's identity, in my opinion. You're not going to be able to figure it out yourself. And so very simply, the way champ identity and champ reference points are actually created, and the way I create them to this day, is obviously I think about the kit and when it's like strong and weak, but most importantly, like what feels good. Like, just really simply, what feels good? Like, start playing it. And so when you play it, it's like, it feels really good when I'm in the isolated 1v1. I feel like I can bully, but as soon as the junglers are involved, it doesn't feel good. Or, I feel really good when I'm playing with my jungler. I love 2v2s or something like that, you know? So based off my experiences and what feels good and what doesn't feel good, in combination with using logic and reading the kit, you can start to draw you can start high level and then slowly but surely get more and more granular, right?
A really common one, I was even doing an Emerald review today. Just as simply, it's like, I used all my abilities. Now my champion specifically is just really useless, and I just ran in and died. And that sounds so simple, but people really struggle with that. Again, I reviewed an Emerald Hecarim. He just used his E and his R, and they're against range champions. Like, what do you expect to do? You just run it. Like, you got to realize that once your abilities are over, the play's done. Simple as that. It's like, once I have no E as Hecarim, play's done.
Yep.
That should be, your mindset.
He's a very cooldown reliant champion.
Yeah. Well, and you can fit that category with a lot of champs. Some champs don't require auto attacks. Abilities as much. Let's say Darius and all that sort of stuff, right? They're more like you can just sit on people and auto attack them, or I guess if you burn your E and Darius, you're quite useless.
I think a better one would be like there are certain champions that have very low cooldowns that you can constantly be in combat with as well, right? Like, and there are other like for example, let's say Mundo. Right, Mundo is not really a champion where you would like really
cooldown reliant.
Yeah, you're going that. Gosh darn it, I missed my Q. I better disengage. It's like, you can probably stick in the
a
fight,
better
and
example.
your cooldowns are quite low. You can kind of stick around. So like there are champs like that, and then there are champs that are very cool, like higher cooldowns, right? So you have low and high cooldowns. So I guess what we're trying to get at is that you need to use a combination of what feels good and what feels bad. You need to extrapolate from your own experiences, just literally what's leading to success in your games and what's not. And then you need to combine that with common sense and just reading the kit and understanding that as well.
Like, what is my key ability?
Yeah, exactly right. Do I have high cooldowns, low cooldowns? Do I that sort of thing? But I will say, if you're in the lower elo brackets and newer to the game, that's where you need to utilize like educational content. You can't expect yourself to really understand and figure out the champ's identity by yourself. It's just not really feasible.
Yeah, so Nate here said, also just starting at broad strokes and working your way in. The LoL wiki page for classes splits champions into generic classes, fighter, mage, tank, marksman, as well as specific roles within each class, tank, vanguard, or warden. Say you're playing a tank character, the generic description of tank says that you're typically a tough melee character who sacrifices damage for powerful crowd control. Your purpose isn't usually to kill opponents, rather disrupt them. Once you start getting a feel for centering your playstyle around your CC skills, look deeper at if your champion is a vanguard, and then look at the biggest threats on each team. If you're playing Braum, you're probably best used sitting on your Jinx, saving your CC abilities until the enemy assassin or frontline tries to attack. If you're a Scion, you probably want to try to place yourself as close to the enemy damage threat as possible to prevent them from safely attacking your team. Again, focus on broad strokes first. Start with just being mindful of how you're utilizing your champion strengths and remembering where your champion is weak. Once you get the basics, think of how your character fits within the subclasses, and then later, what makes them unique from their subclass counterparts.
I think that's a really great answer. I love that answer. I totally agree with the whole start with broad strokes, and then you kind of slowly get more in detail.
Midday says, I've recently gone on a very structured journey to identify reference points. I have a lot of thoughts regarding how to identify champion reference points, but they're a little too much to write down here. He links something here. Jordan here says, it's one thing to know what your champion is good at. Their reference points and role in general. Where the rubber meets the road, in my opinion, is how to identify interacts with your... your identity interacts with your team and your opponents in each specific game. As a 5v5, 2v2, 1v1, you might usually be strong in a certain situation. You were mentioning that before. But where is your opponent strong, this time? Another question you could ask yourself is, I'm usually meant to be doing this job, but is this actually what we need to do right now? Just a couple of thoughts, but it is such a detailed topic. Keep Calm and Scale says, these are the aspects I personally focus on to build champ mastery. Number 1, power spikes when I'm strong after first component, with level 6 after first completed item, with level 9 after 2 items. This obviously is affected by game timer. Getting level 6 at 6 minutes is different from level 6 at 9 minutes, which is where the fuel aspect of it comes into play. What do I need to fight? How important is my ult? Do I need to flash? Who I threaten and who am I threatened by, and at what stages of the game? In other words, who can kill me and who can I kill? Ability usage. Which abilities should I hold against which champions? Which should I use reactively and which preemptively? This is where most of the grind comes from, as there is so many champion interactions to explore. Finally, a lot of feel-based experiences. How your champion moves around the map and in fights. What angles they can use. Can they steal objectives in a certain way? Can they abuse vision in certain spots? How they tether other champions' abilities? What specific champions they can 1v1 and under what conditions?
I think it's a great response.
Good questions.
Yeah, and so I think, just to wrap this one up, I think that it doesn't need to be perfect. Even if your interpretation of the champion is not objectively true, at least you have something to work with. I keep reminding people this, is that in League, it's not about whether or not your play is correct or your decision is correct. It's about the fact that you are playing with an intention and you have a plan, you have some kind of a semblance of intention behind your decision, and then you're owning it and you're playing with conviction. If you went out there and you thought to yourself, for whatever reason, that you play Annie and you just thought that Annie was the biggest one-item spiker in the game, and you just, that was your entire mindset. I want to kill everyone at one item. Even if that wasn't objectively true, at least you're trying to do something. You're thinking about something. You're testing something. And I think that, don't be too perfectionist when it comes to this sort of thing. We've both been through moments where we've had a very unique interpretation of champs we've played, and many people would completely disagree with that. But it worked. That's okay. You can. There's many ways to. What's the saying? There's many ways to skin a cat.
A sheep. Something like that.
Skin a sheep.
Something like that.
Skin a cat. What does that even mean?
I have heard that before.
Something like that. You get what I mean.
Many ways, shear a sheep.
Let us know in the comments.
Yeah. All right. Mailbag time?
Yep.
Away we go. Welcome back for Nathan's Mailbag. Jingle, jingle, jingle song. Alrighty then. Our first question here comes from an anonymous listener. The title of this email is Individual Ranked Points. Hello, Nathan and Curtis. I'm a long-time League player, about 8 years now, and I got my best friend into the game about 4 years ago. He's had a lot of ups and downs, but his biggest gripe with the current rank system is the general idea that if he loses a game but played well, he will lose LP equal to anyone else on his team. Of course, there's some fluctuations from MMR and whatnot, but generally, if his jungler goes 1-13 and he went 13-1, but we lost, they will still both lose LP, and that really frustrates him. For me as an Emerald player in climbing, I recognize that there is so much more to League than individual performance, especially in lane. He's a top lane main, so he puts so much emphasis on mechanics and skirmishes, but his knowledge of resets and macro is lacking. Whereas my mechanics are probably only about as good as his or a little better, despite the ranked gap being my emerald to his silver gold, although he peaked quite a few seasons ago. But my macro and decision making is much stronger since I've played a fair amount of pretty much every role and have settled on the ADC at the moment. Naturally, I can see the appeal of having individual ranked points where you would lose less LP for going 13-1 in a loss versus 1-13 in a loss. And you would gain less if you won a game after going 1-13, but at the same time, I personally feel like this would detract from the real essence of League as a team game, not just a display of mechanical prowess, but a strategy game that requires for you to work with your team and around your team to win. It's possible having individual ranked points would incentivize people to grief less and play more seriously, but it could also incentivize people to play selfishly, that the game loses its identity as a team game and people would instead just prefer to lane the entire game instead of really engaging in team play. At the end of the day, I think he's frustrated with the game at the moment, and I don't blame him. He was a Yone top main that got hit hard with the lethal tempo gone, but I'm wondering what professional coaches such as yourselves think about the idea of individual ranked points rather than awarding points solely based on the team's win-losses. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, I want to explain very simply why this can never be the case. Okay? So I'll paint you a scenario. Let's say we're in draft, and in the draft, for whatever reason, your top laner has to blind pick. No one's going to swap with him. He has to blind pick. He blind picks his champion that he plays. He gets counterpicked. You get your counterpick. Maybe you're playing jungles. You just, for whatever reason, you're the last pick and you get to see everything. You pick a champ that works well for the comp. And let's say in the game, for whatever reason, you actually decide to path away from your top laner. So you're on red side. You path from top to bot. And their jungler path bot to top on blue side. And so you essentially split the map, right? Now what happens is that your top laner now is in a counter matchup, gets pathed away from, takes a few bad trades and dies, and gets dove and loses, and maybe they go down 2 waves or whatever. Or maybe the enemy plays it really well because they're in a counter matchup, bounces, and then they're in a really bad state. And let's say you just ignore top. You're doing your thing. You're having your best life. You go bot. You kill bot. You're 2-0. You get a double kill. Your top lane is now 0-1, and they're already down like a level. Now that game is now going to be very hard for your top laner. You may not even be incentivized to go top side because you know that you can't even help your top laner because they're so far behind and they're so weak. You don't even win the 2v2. So you're like, you know what? I'm just going to leave him. And so you keep going bot. And so now you're maybe 3-0, 4-0. The game goes on, and your top lane is dying again and again and again. Now in that game, do you think that's fair for that top laner to lose more LP than you just because they got screwed over in the draft, they got pathed away from, and they got ditched by everyone in that game? Now, I'm not saying he didn't play perfectly, but you're going to say that he deserves all of the blame for that loss? Well, in my opinion, sure, there were things that maybe he could have done, but a lot of that was, in my opinion, somewhat out of his control.
It's the game's responsibility of the strong side of that game.
Exactly right. There are things that you did as a team, even starting from draft, that created that scenario. So that's number one. That's just one scenario, and there's many scenarios that can be painted like that.
You could even argue that the strong side, because they had all the resources, they lose in the game. They should actually be punished because they were failed to carry. They should lose more LP, which is so. That's so mind-boggling.
Yeah. Exactly right. The people that had the kills, it was on them to win, and they failed to deliver. The game. They maybe that 80 carry that was 6-0 gave a bounty in a pivotal moment, lost focus, and then you lose the game. Or the jungler died before a Baron, and then the enemy get Baron. Who deserves more or less LP there? I don't know. You could easily make the argument for the other way around. That's a really good point. The second thing is that you can't gauge impact through deaths. Because like we mentioned on this podcast, high value and low value deaths. For example, let's say the jungler is 0-6, but the jungler knows that they have a really fed mid laner. And so they literally go in to block a key pivotal skill shot or to go in and trade their life to create space for the mid laner to do maximum damage. You're saying that if they die less, they're going to get less. They're going to get more LP, right? Well, that's a bit weird because think about it. They on one hand they might want to go in to create space for the Eddie Garrett and might have to trade their life to win that team fight. But then if they're incentivized to not die as much because they won't lose as much LP, then you're literally telling that person to do something that potentially might even lose them the game. So you got to remember that it's not as simple, it's not as black and white as you go 0-5 that you're griefing the game. Things might not have gone your way. You might have got snowballed upon. You can still have high value deaths and contribute to the team even with high deaths.
And this is going back to our conversation with the Coachless and Xpetu and stats in League. This is why we've just really struggled to use stats as an improvement tool because it doesn't show all these things or understand the context of the game.
And even with kills the other way around, you could get 4-0, but you could have just you could objectively have done the wrong thing. You know, you might have actually traded off a neutral objective for that kill, which was actually a really important part of the win condition. Or you might have got kills on people that were already worth 0-4 and you traded off your other side of the map that actually you could have saved your top laner from getting dove again, but you killed a 0-4 Ezreal. It's like, well, what's more valuable here? So scoreline doesn't exactly dictate or tell you the whole picture at all, actually.
And I'm going to say bigger picture here. So firstly, the underlying belief that we currently think the rank system does a pretty good job at putting people where they should be. We haven't really seen extreme cases where this silver guy, we can look at his gameplay and he's like, oh, he should actually be an emerald player, right? Even if they were to introduce a system like this, people really underestimate how different their rank would look. It might be best case scenario. Yeah. You might be like 100 or 200 LP better than you're currently at. Maybe that's on the extreme.
I would call bullshit.
But you're never going to go, suddenly I'm a silver player. Now I'm just a diamond level player because I'm just performing the best in our game. Because we can look at your gameplay and you're making so many mistakes and missing so many opportunities.
And what have you? They're just remembering the games that they did really well.
Exactly right.
Because the reason this is that it's like a cognitive bias, right? Where you're conveniently forgetting all the games where you were the one that lost the game for your team. You're just remembering the games because they're the most painful, the ones where you went 6-0 and you had a 0-8 bot lane. That's the one, that's the searing kind of thing in the back of your mind that's eating you alive. But in reality, it's just because it's the most painful doesn't mean it's actually what's happening. It's not the most prevalent. You're just remembering those games more.
We can clearly differentiate, guys, even between like an Emerald 1 and an Emerald 4 player. There's
extremely clear
skills and things differentiate. And that whole performance, little individual skill, that's not going to make you an Emerald 1 player suddenly. It's just not. Maybe you can do the
and it would just skew the competitive integrity of the game. It would be a disaster.
It's just balanced. Everyone's in this all together. One team loses a shitload. One team gains a shitload of LP. That's just how it has to be, you know? That's how it should be.
Yep. Exactly right. And it's brutal. But it's a long, and that's why. But that's why the system only works over the long run.
Yes,
that's the key thing. That's what solves all problems. Everything will look unbalanced and shit and unfair if you zoom in.
Isolation.
In isolation, if you zoom in too much. When you zoom out, all of a sudden, and we're talking in sample sizes of 100 games, 200 games, 300 games, all of a sudden things start to come to light, and it starts to make a lot of sense.
All right, next question here comes from David. The title of this email is A Cautionary Tale. Hello, Nathan and Curtis. I wanted to write in because of the discussion you guys had on episode 201 of the podcast. It was a very small segment about a lot of people starting lower and actually being lower than they were in the season before. This was totally me, and I was so ready to comment about how horrible it was and that I was feeling that pain too. When the video came out, I was losing a lot of games in Platinum when I reached mid-Diamond 3 the last time I was playing, ranked consistently. You can probably tell by the way I worded that last sentence, there is more to this story, so let's start from the beginning. I've been following your guys' content for quite some time now and am a religious zealot when it comes to the process and your mentality about the game. You 100% have the sauce when it comes to improving at League of Legends. My friends be damned. I was able to go from Gold 4 all the way to Diamond 4 in about a year of sticking to the process. I would only play in 3 blocks, always start the session with a review of my last block and focus on my gameplay and ignore my teammates' mistakes. I mained Pantheon mid, going more of an assassin route like Keegan, Challenger Panther mid player who makes educational content as well. But I had my own twist to it and was finding good results. After the changes to Eclipse and huge BC nerfs going into the next season, I was very discouraged and felt very weak in the mid lane. Also, with the rise of mage items, giving some more power to them directly after the item rework, coupled with starting college courses again, I had to take a break from the game. I did play my placements, split 1 of 2024, getting placed into Emerald, but then didn't play much after that until now. Now we have the beginning of the end. My placements this split put me in Plat 3, which I scoffed at. I thought I can get to Emerald quickly and then focus on making Diamond again. Little did I know the classic Stage 4 issues of being tied to my previous rank had begun to set in. One loss after another, I started questioning myself. I quickly began to get angry, thinking there has to be a reason I'm losing these games. I can't have gone from Diamond to skill level to Plat this quickly. Surely something is wrong with the matchmaking. I had noticed that I had forgone the process. I was playing in 3 blocks, wasn't reviewing. Because I'm Diamond, I don't need to try here. Slowly, panic began to set in because I couldn't cope with the fact that I would have to give 100% and try my hardest to win these games. I finally broke down and leveled with myself after a 7-game loss streak where I only got ace 1 time. 6 of those losses were my fault. I was there because I was keeping myself there by thinking I could autopilot my way back to Diamond when being focused and trying my best is what got me there before. I wanted to give this little story. A caution to people to not be so quick to think something is wrong with the matchmaking. Maybe other cases are different, but I thought this might help dissuade others from thinking the same mistakes I did when I used to be a champion of the process. I think fake process might be holding lots of others back as well. I've had much more success and I have had all 2-to-1 blocks so far now that I've pulled myself back up and gotten back into the process. It's funny to think that simply believing you are better than the process can have such an impact on your performance. I'm heading quickly towards Emerald and already have mostly Emerald players in my lobbies, so I'm slowly inching my way back up there. But I'm not Diamond until I get Diamond, plain and simple. Thank you both for all you do for the community, and thank you for how much you've helped me grow as a player and as a person.
I love this so much. I think there's so much here to kind of riff on, but like, I think this message is incredibly important. Probably one of the most important ones we have on the podcast, because and you know what happens and what this is, what this shows is that there's actually not a ton of difference it's like between like platinum and diamond, in the sense that it's a lot of small things, and when you're not playing with intensity and you're not trying, all those small things start to get sloppy, and it's like you don't get that reset off, and you're just a little bit late to that fight, or you miss that ability, and it's those things really add up. And the moment you think you're better than the process, the moment you think that you're entitled to win a game because you're just better than these players, and you get sloppy on those small things, you just start losing because that is your edge. The reason you were Diamond 4 is because you were doing all those small things when they weren't. But if you're not doing all those small things, you are just like them. There's not that much. It's not like you're just crazy mechanically gifted and you're just magically a diamond player.
The way League can start really shifting, you sloppy doing the small things, like massive rank
discrepancies.
Yeah.
And I want to give, just to kind of tie on from this, a bit of a case study. I had someone in my program who also took a bit of a break, come back, was diamond and then in platinum, struggling on Plat 4, like gold games, right? That big of a discrepancy. And what he found was that he was so angry that he was in these games that he would he was like, these people are playing such bad macro, they're making so many bad decisions, that he literally was not doing things that are wrong, like not grouping when he should have been grouping, not syncing up with his jungler, resetting when his jungler's on objectives, literally doing things just because he's like, these plays are bad. Like it's like a cognitive kind of dissonance there where it's like, I should be able to, I shouldn't have to do these things to win in this elo bracket. But that is the game. That is what that was your edge. You were doing these things, and he's literally playing like a platinum player now. And because he thought he was too, entitled, and now he's realizing, holy shit, yeah, I thought my teammates were so bad that I thought I was better than them, that I didn't have to do this stuff, or I was playing too selfishly. He kind of went to the extreme. He just changed his whole kind of way of playing the game. And then there he was. Then you're in platinum. So I just think that this is a really good reminder that, yeah, you're never too good for the process. You're never too good for playing with intensity. Even if you're playing with players that are significantly lower than you can still lose games if you're not playing for focused League of Legends. And it's, yeah, great reminder.
Yeah, I love the story here. I want to go back to our episode there. That was the beginning of the season where we said we found that people were way lower than we were surprised. But that's all I think pretty stabilized now. I think it's
so too.
it's just it's the beginning of the season. Just everyone just relax. I think that was the first 2-3 weeks, but it's fine.
And look, even if, let's say the system was a bit wrong, right? Let's say for whatever reason you went down way more than you thought you should have. Okay, again, like what you mentioned as well, accepting your rank, that is the only way out. And the moment you accept it and you come in, you give your opponents respect. You don't fear your opponents, but you respect your opponents. You just give them the respect they deserve. You go in there, you do your job, you play high intensity League of Legends, 3 blocks, boom, you'll be out of there in a flash, right? As long as, you are playing to your level. Don't stress it.
Yeah, and I can talk from experience. When I make guides for my Jungle Academy, I have like Emerald 1, Diamond 4 accounts that I play on. That's obviously way below my skill level. But if I'm a bit sloppy in those games, I can make those games really hard for myself and lose them very, very easily. So, and that's like, hundreds of LP below my skill level. So, and I can feel the difference when I'm like, okay, let's actually, I'm going to try here, play with some intensity here so I can actually get the clips from my guide and stuff like that. And the games have become way easier. You can easily disrespect even just a single moment where you think they're going to misplay a fight and it's a fight where it's like even and you could do something else that would be actually completely fine and probably the correct decision, but you're like, screw it, I'll just go for it. Or I'll overstand the map intentionally here. That's game changing, So 100%. You don't disrespect the game. You've got to respect the game, respect the rank, and the rank system does a fantastic job.
That it for today?
That is it for today. All right. Any final comments here, Curtis?
Skool community. Check that out. Other than that, keep chipping away, guys.
We'll see you guys next week.